Good morning and good afternoon and good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's World Bank Live event commemorating the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia, also known as Ida Hot. My name is Louise Cord, and I'm the Global Director for Social Sustainability and Inclusion at the World Bank. I will be moderating today's discussion. I have short brown hair, I'm wearing a pink scarf, and I have a black and gray patterned shirt on. Before we begin, I'd like to bring your attention to several accessibility features that we're offering today. We have captioning available in English at the bottom of your screen through the captioning or CC function. We also have interpretation live in in French and Spanish. And for this, go to the bottom of your screen and click the interpretation function, which is the globe icon. I'd like to also ask that you use as much as possible the chat box because we'd like to make this video session as interactive as possible. We have people moderating the box who will answer some of the questions through the chat box and others will be able to ask our panelists. So please raise your concerns and your questions. We also have a live poll question that I encourage you to take part in. You can find the poll box on the right-hand corner of your screen, and I get to announce the results of the poll at the end of the session. So please take part. And finally, this webinar is being recorded live. This week, we join millions of people around the globe and our partner international organizations and CSOs to commemorate Ida Hot. The global theme this year is Our Bodies, Our Lives, and Our Rights, which gives us a fantastic opportunity to better understand the role of legislation in inclusive development. The first step to building an inclusive society is understanding the legal and institutional challenges faced by sexual and gender minorities that prevent them from participating and contributing and benefiting from an economy that is inclusive on equal footing with others. The World Bank's Equality of Opportunity for Sexual and Gender Minorities, or EcoSOGI report, is part of our efforts to help create more inclusive societies and understand the role of legislation in inclusive development. The World Bank's SOGI Global Advisor, Clifton Cortez, will expand on the findings of this report later today. I'm also pleased to announce that we have an excellent panel that will feature representatives from governments, CSOs, and the World Bank. And I look forward to hearing from them about what governments, international organizations, and CSOs can do to expand evidence based on SOGI inclusion and to incentivize legal and regulatory reform to create genuine opportunities for all. I would now like to kick off the session by inviting you to see a brief video that highlights the findings of our EcoSOGI report. Thank you.
Did you know that sexual and gender minorities continue to face barriers in all aspects of their lives, including education, employment, health, and political and civil inclusion? Did you know that sexual and gender minorities are often victims of hate crimes and criminalized because of who they are? Hello, I'm Cesar, and I'm here to talk about the Equality of Opportunity for Sexual and Gender Minorities report developed by the World Bank. It's the start of a new series of studies assessing laws and regulations that affect the lives of sexual and gender minorities. It also sheds light on the impact that COVID-19 is having on LGBTI people. So, what is covered in this report? The report uses 6 indicators to measure laws that discriminate against people based on their sexual orientation and gender identity in 16 countries. Criminalization, access to inclusive education, access to the labor market, access to public services and social protection, civil and political inclusion, and protection from hate crimes. Let's take a short trip around the world to learn more. The study shows that although most countries address discrimination against sexual and gender minorities in some way, no country has achieved true equality in treatment. For example, some countries lack legal protections to address bullying and harassment of LGBTI people in schools and other educational settings. LGBTI workers are not guaranteed equal pay or pensions for equal work, and several countries still criminalize behavior based on a person's sexual orientation and fail to adequately address hate crimes. The good news is we can prevent and eliminate discrimination and pave the way to a better future. The report offers good practice policy actions to help decision makers assess and alleviate legal barriers to inclusion. The bottom line? Laws matter for the inclusion of sexual and gender minorities. Equality of opportunity is possible, and together we can build a more inclusive world.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite Cliff Cortez, our SOGI Global Advisor at the World Bank, to give you more lessons and go into a bit more detail on the EcoSOGI report and tell us a little bit about the way forward for this important initiative. Cliff, over to you.
Thank you, Louise. I'm not going to spend much time. That video and your remarks have covered a lot of it. I want to just say, reiterate for the World Bank and all of us, that data is of paramount importance to making the case for LGBTI people's inclusion. And that's true in the World Bank's programming, and it's true relative to the clients that we support, governments around the world. After all, numbers are hard to argue with. And one of the lessons we all know we've learned from policy advocacy around legal issues and legislation is that it's not only laws. You can get good laws in the books, but you might still have a gap relative to implementation and change in society. But absolutely a key piece of the puzzle is getting the laws right and making the laws inclusive. The Equality of Opportunity for Sexual and Gender Minorities initiative sets out to bridge a significant gap in the legal data that pertains to LGBTI people all around the world. It's the first of its kind to look at so many data points on the 6 indicator sets that the video just described. Now, in the first iteration of the 16 countries, so the first iteration of the initiative, the report covered 16 countries, and we looked at a diversity of geographies, levels of inclusiveness more generally, economic development levels, as well as different legal traditions. So that made up which countries we brought into that first 16 set. We're now capitalizing on the momentum of the first pilot report, and we're happy to announce the expansion of the EcoSOGI initiative. And the expansion is going to feature a lot more countries, bringing the total number of surveyed countries to approximately 60. And for the first time, we're going to try to also include an economic analysis of the correlations between the SOGI legal data set on inclusion and indicators of economic development. So it's our belief that the data will help us build on the evidence from around the world that exclusion of any kind hurts an individual's life choices, undermines development progress, and costs money. So we're also updating the kind of data we're collecting to give a stronger emphasis on issues pertaining to gender identity and intersex people. So in this endeavor, we're partnering with the Asian Development Bank to include a significant number of countries in the Asia region. There'll be lots of countries in other regions as well, but specifically also in the Asia region. And we welcome the support of other development partners, shareholders of the bank. So other development partners like ADB that I mentioned, but other shareholders of the bank, I want to mention especially Canada, and that support this work. And while mainstreaming of SOGI inclusion in development is still not a reality, we're edging closer to that day. I'm sure of it. The World Bank's going to continue to work tirelessly towards that goal, and we're going to continue to help ensure that no one is discriminated against and left behind because of who they are or who we love. Back over to you, Louise.
Thanks, Cliff. I really appreciate your highlighting the importance of SOGI equality, both as an intrinsic human right, but also because it contributes to our goals of economic development, poverty reduction, and shared prosperity. And so I'm really looking forward to this next phase, which will give us more data to explore some of the linkages to growth and to the economic values even further. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Bruno Carrasco, the Director General of Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department from the Asian Development Bank, who will provide some brief remarks about the expansion of the EcoSOGI initiative and how the ADB itself envisions moving its data generation efforts forward. Bruno?
A very good day to you, and thank you to our partners at the World Bank for having me at your IDAHOT event. My name is Bruno Carrasco. I'm the Director General of the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department at the Asian Development Bank. We are indeed delighted to be working in collaboration with the World Bank and other international financial institutions on the topic of sexual orientation and gender identity, or SOGI inclusion. Marking this day emphasizes the importance of inclusive development, as we know that sexual and gender minorities are often amongst the most excluded in our societies. If we can ensure that inclusion of such groups in our development programs, all the evidence suggests that other vulnerable groups will also benefit. I'm also here to mark the excellent progress on the ECO-SOGI joint research between ADB and the World Bank on legal barriers to sexual and gender minority inclusion. Legal barriers have very practical effects, restricting access to social protection, to the labor market, and to core public services such as health and education. And so the research is highly relevant to how we design projects and programs. In fact, the global theme of IDAHOT, our bodies, our lives, our rights, perfectly encapsulates the different areas in which there's still work to be done on SOGI inclusion. For ADB, our SOGI inclusion work is rooted within our medium-term strategy, or Strategy 2030, where operational priority 1 covers eliminating remaining poverty and reducing inequalities. Supporting the most vulnerable is a key part of this work, and creating opportunities for them will play a fundamental part in building a truly inclusive Asia and the Pacific. Although SOGI is a relatively new topic to us at ADB, there are increasing number of entry points. There's interest in how SOGI is covered in our review of our safeguard policy statement, and on the proactive development side, there's interesting work being pursued on gender equality and social inclusion, or GESI, in our South Asia department. The latter piece of work incorporates consultations with vulnerable and excluded people across South Asia, including women's groups, ethnic minorities, disabled people, and LGBTQI, amongst others. And this is generating new and interesting insights, which we will mainstream into our operations. Before I sign off, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our audience, both inside and outside of the World Bank and ADB. Thank you to the World Bank for leadership and staff for adding impetus to this issue of SOGI inclusion, and also for providing advice and support to other IFIs in a strong spirit of open collaboration. Thank you very much, and enjoy the remainder of the event.
Bruno, thank you for your insightful remarks, and particularly for the collaboration that we're thrilled to be having with the ADB around this important initiative. Now it is my pleasure to welcome the conversation and the panelists. We have Nazli.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being today with all of you, and please accept my best regards to each of you. Before I answer, let me share with all of you that today we mark the day that reminds us that we are all equal, no matter of what our sexual orientation or gender identity. So let us stand together against injustice and prejudice today and every day after today. Regarding the LGBT and gender minority, let me share with all of you where we are standing as a state in regard of the legislation. In my last panel that I had with the World Bank, I raised such a high important steps by the Kosovo government regarding the codification of the civil rights, where for the first time we will address also the issue of the LGBT, and through this, I think, and we do believe that we will complete the legislation part in regard to knowing the LGBT rights. In regard of the gender minority, recently we adopt and the document has been voted. This is the National Strategy and Action Plan in domestic violence, gender issue, gender rights, including also the LGBT rights. So this document has been adopted for the first time in Kosovo. A part of this, the speech of hate, the homophobia and other types of the discrimination are criminalized with the Kosovo law. So freely I can say that what is most important in our country, except the new steps, also it's very important to enforce the current or existing legislation in order to have the clear picture what is needed to intervene and what is needed to be drafted or to be adopted in a future. I am aware that we are not doing miracles, but for us it's very important the equal and the work on the equality, because not only we as a Kosovo, but almost everywhere in the world, we are facing inequality in different levels of life. We do not have explicitly identified, let's say, the opportunity for the job places or education or other fields of life, because here we do not have any major problem, because we are facing unemployment in general in our country. But what I would like to remark in this is that the high number of gender, let's say, women and girls, they are facing unemployment, especially unemployment among the other minorities. In this regard, there are different initiatives by the Kosovo government side, especially with the economic package for the sustainability economic initiatives in the country. And also, I would like to share, to close this, the first answer in this. We do believe that the codification of the civil rights is one of the most important initiative in the legislation field, because we will have the first code for the first time after the war. It took us a lot of times, the years, to work in this document. And also, what is the most important in this document, for the first time, we have the affirmative steps in this draft code in regard addressing the issue of the marriage of the same sex. It is true that inside the code it's not recognized the direct marriage, because we are facing other problems in this document. But through this affirmative steps with a special article in the code, we open the road, the issue, the equality, the rights of the LGBT community to be regulated with laws, and those laws to be harmonized with the Kosovo constitution and with other existing laws, such as the law on gender equality, such as the law against the discrimination, and also the law against the domestic violence, where we have for the first time also the LGBT community. So it's a big number of the initiatives and legislations in this regards, and we do believe that the phase that we will challenge is the right implementation of those legislation steps that we have currently in the work, and those who are currently as a legislation with that we will continue to work in the future.
Thank you so much, Nazli. It's great to see Kosovo at the forefront of LGBTI rights and legislation around those rights. Very, very good to see. I'm going to turn to Jay Gilliam to ask a question that's almost a little bit about the reverse, because in many countries, it's not the story of Kosovo. And in many countries, sexual and gender minorities are experiencing escalation in LGBTI violence and rhetoric against them. What steps, could I ask, is the U.S. government taking to protect and bolster the rights of sexual and gender minorities and to support local communities?
Well, hello and good day, everyone, wherever you are joining us from around the world. It's an honor to be here with you all to mark Ida Hobbit 2022, and my thanks to our gracious hosts at the World Bank. My name is Jay Gilliam. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am the U.S. Agency for International Development Senior LGBTQI+ Coordinator. USAID is the lead U.S. foreign assistance agency and works in over 100 countries. And as Administrator Samantha Power has said, USAID is committed to the advancements of LGBTQI+ inclusive development. And this reflects the concept that every person is instrumental in transforming their societies. We at USAID also acknowledge that even in countries with legal protections, LGBTQI+ people face alarmingly high rates of violence. These intersectionalities and multiple and overlapping forms of phobias targeting LGBTQI+ people continue to deny LGBTQI+ people access to essential services and social benefits, which all too often trap them in a cycle of extreme poverty and poor health. Also, I would like to reiterate President Biden's statement yesterday marking Ida Hobbit, specifically when he shared, in quote, "Strong and healthy democracies must ensure LGBTQI+ people can enjoy full participation in society and access all the benefits available to a nation's citizens." As someone from the state of Texas, I echo the president's acknowledgement that, quote, "hateful legislative attacks against members of our own LGBTQI+ community cannot be tolerated in America or anywhere else," end quote. Now, to your question at hand, I want to point out that in addition to a spike in anti-LGBTQI+ rhetoric and legislation, we are also seeing the impacts and shocks of events like Putin's invasion of Ukraine, which is creating new challenges for groups in vulnerable situations. So clearly there is a lot happening now, making this conversation as well as this year's Ida Hobbit theme, our bodies, our lives, our rights, very timely. As many of you know, the Biden-Harris administration outlined its commitment to the protection of LGBTQI+ persons and a parallel call to action across the US government via the Presidential Memorandum on Advancing the Human Rights of LGBTQI+ persons around the world, which was issued in February of 2021. Just last month, we saw the historic release of the 2022 Interagency Report on the implementation of the Presidential Memorandum, which I encourage folks to Google and take a look at. This report outlines efforts across 14 government agencies. Yes, that's 14 government agencies to implement the memorandum, including the work of USAID. As today we're talking about inclusive laws and policies, let me share a few examples from USAID and what we had in the report. So our country mission in Southern Africa, which is supporting strengthening local governance structures to improve community response to gender-based violence. Specifically, a USAID-supported network facilitated a range of education and awareness programs with community members, families, and religious structures to raise awareness about the rights of LGBTQI+ persons and reduce victimization, attacks, and hate crimes against LGBTQI+ persons. Our country mission in Georgia has provided legal and other needed services to the members of the LGBTQI+ community who have been victims of hate crimes, violence, discrimination based on their sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. And in the Dominican Republic, USAID supported the project Being LGBTI in the Caribbean, which launched the results of the first of its kind report, Human Rights of Intersex Persons in Barbados, Dominican Republic, Haiti, and Jamaica. And this report describes the structural discrimination faced by intersex people in the region, including intersex people living in rural areas and in extreme poverty. Moreover, in 2021, USAID and PEPFAR launched India's first comprehensive clinic for the transgender community in Hyderabad. These health facilities serve as a one-stop center, providing comprehensive services for the transgender community, including general health services, guidance and medication on hormone therapy and gender-affirming procedures, mental health counseling, HIV and STI counseling, prevention and treatment services, and legal aid and social protection services, all in a stigma-free environment. At USAID, we are also updating our overall LGBTQI+ blueprint. I want to emphasize that a priority of this policy update will be supporting localization and partnerships efforts. We're also consulting with a broad spectrum of stakeholders from civil society to better understand what's currently working and what needs to change. Finally, I want to refer everyone to two guidance documents US has issued on ensuring LGBTQI+ inclusion in the development space. One focuses on integrating LGBTQI+ considerations in resilience and food security sector. The second focuses on integrating LGBTQI+ considerations into education programming. In short, both of these guidance documents underscore challenges, include recommendations for inclusion, and reference concrete best practices. Given that education is one of the indicators in the World Bank's Equosogi report, I'm especially excited to announce that this week, USAID launched a new online education learning module focused on integrating LGBTQI+ considerations into education settings. I hope you will check it out. Now, the module is designed for a wide spectrum of audiences, including development practitioners, governments, and activists. And given recent developments, I really hope you all can help us amplify this. We're prioritizing inclusive policies internally as well. This includes producing and conducting trainings so colleagues at headquarters and all over the world can ensure inclusion of LGBTQI+ equities in our foreign assistance programming and practices. There are, of course, many more examples I could discuss today, including the exciting launch of the Global LGBTQI+ Inclusive Democracy and Empowerment Fund, or GLIDE, by our State Department colleagues, as well as the integration of LGBTQI+ inclusion at the inaugural Summit for Democracy last December. So I hope you'll check out the report and keep the questions coming in the chat box. And I'll stop here just with one last quote from Administrator Power. Quote, "Our work is far from done. The human rights of LGBTQI+ persons and inclusive development must be a whole of government effort," end quote.
Thank you very much, Tarek. And I really appreciate the emphasis on just that last point, the whole of government approach. We're talking a lot today about laws and regulations, but clearly you need the services to be provided and to be made available to LGBTI+ groups. And it's great to hear that on your side of USAID. Let me turn now to Tarek. We know that Helm is the first NGO in the Arab world that is working towards justice and equal rights for LGBTI people. Could you tell us a bit, what are some of the most challenging issues and aspects about your work? Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and for hosting this really important discussion. To answer your question, I mean, for the past 20 years, we've been, since the creation of Helm, we've been really focused on addressing violations of civil and political rights in Lebanon and in the Greater MENA region. This includes police brutality, discrimination in public and private institutions, the invisibility of queer communities in the public discourse and in emerging national narratives, and lack of access of opportunity, to name a few. However, in the past 2 or 3 years, a few seismic shifts have occurred, particularly in the tripartite crisis that Lebanon had been going through, starting with the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns, which many countries across the globe also suffered from. But in addition to that, Lebanon is still going through a really acute economic crisis and recession, and also the aftermath of the Beirut blast of August 2020, which had a devastating effect on our city, our economy, and our community especially. We have learned many lessons from the past few years, and it has really impacted and shaped our work moving forward. The first lesson is the importance of addressing social and economic rights violations, which have been largely missing from the conversation for a very long time. And second, the unhappy realization of how much the development space has failed LGBTQ people and queer people in general in the MENA region. I say this because when the crisis started hitting, we realized that we were faced with the reality that existing development and humanitarian aid organizations, frameworks, and infrastructure were either unwilling, unable, or unqualified to provide LGBTQ inclusive services on vital needs such as food security, shelter, access to healthcare, education, employment for LGBTQ communities in Lebanon and in the region worldwide. To give you an idea of what that means, in 2020, Helm had approximately recorded 500 individual visits and about 1,000 violations of LGBTQ rights or the rights of LGBTQ people in Lebanon. By the end of 2021, we had 2,300 individual visits and 4,300 violations. Currently, the unemployment level of queer people in Lebanon stands at around 80% in comparison to the national unemployment level, which is at 40%, and approximately 90 to 93% of all of our aid assistance is going for emergency housing, healthcare, and medication, including mental health, which does not receive the attention that it needs to. The most challenging part of our work right now has been sort of balancing, pushing for legislative and policy reform the way we've always done, but also providing life-saving access to basic needs and services, all of which has been left on the shoulders of really small, underfunded, understaffed, mostly unregistered and besieged LGBTQ organizations whose small size and other security-related challenges make them ineligible to address the needs of their communities and ineligible to access funding and access resources. Not only that, it has created really a strategic schism for many of these organizations, including ours, in which we were forced to balance challenging the status quo and the governments that we live in order to enact reforms in legislation, policy, and procedure, but at the same time, not being able to do that because of the need to prioritize addressing the needs of our communities. So in conclusion, Lebanon really is a cautionary tale of the really dire need to queer development and humanitarian spaces across the globe, and not just in the MENA region. We are a small country. Our population is between 3 to 4 million people, depending on which census you trust. But can you imagine if a large-scale climate and humanitarian crisis was to hit a country like Egypt, for example, with 90 plus million residents in it? And it is very clear that there is nothing in place and existing organizations cannot address the need that is surely to arise. If Agenda 2030 says really that no one is to be left behind, this essentially means that we must begin at the back of the line when we start addressing the needs of people. And at the back of the line, in the MENA region, but also across much of the global south, stand queer, gender non-conforming LGBTQ populations. And it is really disheartening that it seems that has yet to materialize.
Thank you so much, Tarek, for reminding us of the role of preparation and that CSO and capacity building can make. And I also really appreciated the monitoring and evaluation, because we need to know these crimes need to be reported, and too often we don't have access to that information. I'd like to ask each of you, I'm going to try to do a second round of questions, but you need to each give me only one thing because we're running a little bit behind. So you each have 1 minute. So it's going to be the one thing that I'm going to ask you for your question, the most important thing. So start thinking what it is. And I'm going to stick with you, Tarek. What can we do in institutions like the World Bank to help SOGI, help you and help LGBTI face challenges on equality and inclusion in Lebanon? What's your one ask for us?
Well, first of all, I think the World Bank is on the right track in addressing the really crucial and chronic lack of data. So much of the academic intellectual engagement on LGBTQ issues in the Middle East has been sequestered in post-colonial studies and theoretical frameworks, and not enough attention has been made on where queer people are, what they're doing, as opposed to what they ought to be doing. So I think we're moving on the right track. What I would suggest, and the one thing, is to really consider the enormous impact that we've had in addressing not identity-based vertical advocacy efforts with governments, but also looking at issue-based horizontal advocacy efforts that aim at integrating LGBTQ people into larger mainstream reform efforts on economic and social rights. For example, housing, social security, healthcare. We have seen so much more results and and ability to infiltrate spaces that have been inaccessible to us before, when we not only focus on identity-based issues such as decriminalization, but also work within the development framework on mainstreaming LGBTQ inclusion in these social and economic rights movements with other like-minded organizations and with international organizations like the World Bank.
Thank you. No, that's quite clear and quite direct. And I do think we can do that probably more, but we are doing that with our environmental and social framework, which gives us that platform, but we need to ramp it up for sure. Let me now turn to Nazli. The one thing that you'd like to do and see the government of Kosovo do to ensure implementation. You said lots of great things are happening, but what's the one thing you need to do to make sure they get implemented?
There are a lot of things, but I will remain in three very important. To support the government and civil society initiatives, to increase the capacity of the security mechanisms, to increase the capacity to the legislation mechanisms, and to support the two main documents such as the project law and civil code and the national strategy and action plan on gender issue, minority issue, LGBT issue.
Great, thank you. That was,
but I raised those most important.
Okay, well, I'll give you the three because you were very quick, so that was good, but they are big, so I don't know, they count double. Let me now go to Jay. What's your one ask of international organizations so that we can help work with you to promote SOGI inclusion?
Sure, yeah, thank you for that question. And I just want to address Tarek and say thank you for noting the ways that development and humanitarian assistance sectors have not been addressing the needs of LGBTQI+ people. I am well aware and am working with colleagues to make sure that we are doing a better job of that. So for the question, of course, international organizations offer tremendous convening power for the LGBTQI+ movement. First and foremost, they are norm builders and norm fortifiers. They also play absolutely crucial roles in resourcing the movement, including through in-kind support. This is accomplished, as Tarek was saying, by the integration of LGBTQI+ considerations to their mandates, their programmatic efforts, their staffing, whether they focus on human rights, humanitarian assistance, or development work. And I think finally, international organizations can undertake the weighty policy analysis with data and research that is crucial for our movement to have that as the backbone for how we are moving forward to provide support to the community and to the movement. So I'll end there.
Nobody does the one thing, but that's okay. There's so much on this agenda that needs to be done. I guess I asked for that. Okay, now speaking of the one thing, we're going to go to the poll. And I'm not sure who's giving the poll results. the winner, with a drum roll, number one, protection against hate crime, which is not surprising because, and if you're not protected and you're not safe, it's the basics, it's the bottom basics for inclusive development. Do we get a number two, or are we just giving number one? No backup? Okay. Looks like we're just doing number one. So now I get to ask you more questions. Number two, education. So also, none of this is surprising because without human capital, one can't contribute. Okay, so we're moving on. I'm giving the first question that's come in is for Nazli. It says, what is the government of Kosovo, you can give us, and you've touched a little bit on this, but what is the government of Kosovo doing to adopt the new civil code that will allow gay couples to marry legally? When can we expect this law to be approved in Parliament next? A straight, direct question.
Yes, recently we sent it to the Parliament, the draft civil code, and it was a debate, not pleasant debate by the members of the Parliament. And of course, we do not agree with their debate. So we turn it back, the civil code. And again, we sit together with the experts and professionals of the working group who drafted the civil code. So very soon, we will resend to the government and to the parliament. And this time we are 99% ensure that the civil code will pass to the parliament, and Kosovo will have for the first time the civil code. For the first time, the human rights are more defined inside the civil code. So there are a lot of affirmatives actions inside the civil code, including the codification of the laws and this affirmative step for the LGBT rights to be regulated with a special law. We are opening the road for the future to work together, not only for the LGBT, but for all other vulnerable groups that are a part of the society.
I'm going to throw in a question from me on this one. And again, it's maybe a one thing kind of question to be brief, but this is pretty, in today's environment, congratulations to the government of Kosovo and to the work that you're doing. What's the one thing you'd advise other countries who are trying to pass something similar to do? How did you build this consensus? What drove it?
As I said, this road was not an easy road. And the subjects are usually the taboo to be discussed in a public and in society. But we faced this and we challenged this debate and discussion. It took us more than 7 years to work in drafting the civil code. Again, there is a debate, pro and contra of the rights of the LGBT in Kosovo, but this debate pro and contra, it's not happening only in Kosovo. Even in most developed countries, the discrimination, the xenophobia, homophobia, you have it already also in other countries. So we will continue with this debate. And it's very important, the debate not to be only on a political level, but the debate to be also in a grassroots level, because the beliefs in different confessions, the beliefs of different groups, the beliefs of the other against the LGBT community needs to be confronted and needs to be challenged through the debate and discussion in this regard. So we had a huge debate, and again, I think it's not enough. We have to continue to develop this debate in other sectors of the society. And also, I have to remark why we came to the civil code, because of the cooperation with the civil society in the country. It's a rule in every legislation step or initiatives the civil society is invited to participate in the working group, to share their knowledge, their experience, in order to have the best law. So debate and discussion are the right road really to have to achieve the aims and the issue that we want to have regulated by the law.
No, that's extremely helpful and very clear. And I really like the partnership with CSOs and the work at the community level, which is something the global practice that I lead can take to heart through our work with community-driven development. So thank you for those points. Let me turn to Jay. Now, this is a broad question, so I'm going to ask you to pick, again, I'll give you two. Nobody pays any attention, but I'll still say two. Can you share good practices in your dialogue with client countries?
Sure, yeah. I think one, in all of our work, we have a couple of principles that we keep in mind at USAID. One is do no harm, and two is nothing about us without us. And with that, we want to make sure that we are engaging with the local community and being able to discuss and what their needs are, what their wants and desires are, so that as we are having discussions around how we can support, that we are supporting those efforts and can be a conduit to having discussions with host government on the needs of LGBTQI+ community in that particular place. So we want to make sure that we are co-creating, that we are letting the local partners lead on setting the strategy, setting the agenda on what their needs are, and then using USAID as a way to support that. And so we do that in terms of ensuring that folks at our USAID missions in countries are regularly in touch with the local community to understand what their needs are in local in continual dialogue with them to do that, and then being able to integrate that into our own USAID country strategies for development assistance in country, and then being able to ensure that as we are working with host governments to deliver on our development assistance, that we are including LGBTQI+ folks in that.
Great, thank you. Very clear, straightforward. Thank you very much for that. Let me turn to Tarek. We have a question from Odisha, India. As you may be aware, India has a caste system that's quite complex. How LGBTI faces many challenges, and particularly those belonging to the Dalit communities. What would be your advice to the LGBTI in the Dalit community? Perhaps you can draw on your experiences in the Middle East.
Well, thank you for that. I'm not intimately familiar with the caste system in India, but I do for sure know that members of the Dalit community are at the receiving end of much violence and much discrimination within India. We have a very similar system here that's based on sort of economic and sectarian-based differences between folks. And Lebanon also plays host to approximately 1 million Syrian refugees, and the intersectional identities that generate the most violence are often those that include refugee communities and LGBTQ communities, both of which comprise the largest portion of the community that Hilm works with. One of the key issues that we've seen is that, very similar to what Jay was saying before, is that nothing about us without us, meaning that without integrating communities within all aspects of the decision-making process and the work that is done on the ground, there is very little progress that you can hope to make. The way we do this is that we work in constant consultation and constant integration with the communities that we serve. The responsibility that we have is to elevate voices that have been chronically and purposefully hidden and obscured in order to affect the policy making and the decision making process, both in terms of the programs that we come up with, but also with the data that we use in order to influence policy, in order to communicate with international actors like the World Bank, like the UN agencies that are now playing a much bigger role in Lebanon than they used to because of the economic crisis and the shift in sort of the Lebanese political and economic topography. There needs to be a conscious effort at inclusion and integrating folks and their voices and their optics into every single aspect of the process. Without that, you cannot hope to have sustainable and impactful work done on the ground.
let me push you a bit further here, Tariq, because there's another question that came in, which is kind of related, which is about the intersectionality of SOGI and ethnicity, which is a little bit like Dalit and LGBTI, obviously. Inclusion, as you say, is important in all streams. But how do you deal with that? How do you promote it when you're double, inclusion is sometimes very difficult with one challenge. Here you have double challenges or triple challenges. How do you generate inclusion in that and ensure inclusion in that environment?
Well, first of all, we need to recognize that there's a multiplicity of environments that we can work with, not only one singular environment in which all inclusion must somehow be integrated at the same time. It is really important to have a strategy, a well-informed strategy moving forward, and to understand that many individuals face a lack of inclusion in communities, including queer communities, in our case, host communities. So our work is not just within working for the rights of everybody with the government or with international actors. It's also working on integrating queer refugees within existing Lebanese host queer communities and making sure that these communities are working together and have each other's back in addressing the systematic violence, abuse, and discrimination that we face because of our SOGI-SC. But to also recognize that the added sort of vulnerability that other aspects of identity also bring aboard, and the importance of making sure that everybody recognizes that. So really moving, the one thing that we did, and we did quite, we insisted upon, is to say that there needs to be an equitable division of resources across the board. Doesn't matter sometimes where the resources are particularly guided towards. We've worked very hard in order to make sure that they're available for everybody, and that everybody feels in this very strong, very diverse holding environment that they have the ability and the support to be able to say what they need to say and highlight the issues that they need to highlight.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to keep on this theme of difficult questions, and I'm going to ask Jay, what about Afghanistan? What about the situation where civil society is struggling to find safe passage for LGBTI Afghans who are not able to leave the region and they don't have any prospect of accessing assistance? What approach, what response can we have in that circumstance?
Sure, yeah. Afghanistan is definitely a difficult situation, particularly in terms of USG responses to that crisis. I think it's another example, and we've had recent examples like Ukraine, where it shows a need that we need to really, as Tariq said, queer the humanitarian assistance space and sector, and we need to be finding ways to do better around making sure that the challenges that LGBTQI plus LGBTQI plus persons face during crises can be addressed by our humanitarian assistance colleagues. And so, that is a particular area that me being appointed to this position, I am focused on for the next couple of years while I'm here, to work with our humanitarian assistance colleagues within USAID and with our State Department colleagues as well, to ensure that we are finding ways and providing guidance, checklists, and trainings to those that work in the humanitarian assistance space to ensure that they understand the common challenges and needs of LGBTQI plus persons through crises. And I know Afghanistan is just one of many examples over the past couple of years that shows we need to be particularly focused with a laser-like determination to ensure that there's true inclusion and integration in this sector of work. But no doubt that Afghanistan was a really challenging and difficult situation, not only for LGBTQI plus persons, but particularly for LGBTQI plus persons because of the unique challenges, needs from Afghanistan. Over.
Thank you. I think that's honest and sincere, and I think an important plea to integrate much more SOGI into humanitarian assistance. There's so much more we can be doing there. That's an important entry point into communities. I have two two more questions. I'm going to try. One is more a statement. So I'm going to really focus on another question to Tariq, which is about the work that you're doing to record phobic violence. What kind of initiatives are being done, can be done to ensure that NGOs learn from one another, and how to do this? And how can the World Bank, this is a question that's being asked, I guess, of us, what work should we be doing to improve this work? And kind of a related question is, CSOs can play a huge role in collecting data, as you noticed. Where to get the resources to do that? Often it's difficult for governments to do this. It's Cliff has discussed often, it's not easy to collect data on LGBTI+. So what's your advice for funding on that? So both a question of knowledge sharing and learning and a question of data. And guess what? You have 1 minute because we have a closing speaker and I want to make sure she has the time. Over to you.
Very quickly, one of the reasons why we've been successful in gathering so much data is because Helen plays a hybrid role of being a service provider and a need and basic needs provider, as well as an advocacy organization. Members of the community are angels that come to you and relive their trauma and share information with you without something in return. I'm not saying that this is sort of a transactional relationship, but I am saying that you do need to show that you care. You do need to show that you have your ear closely to the ground, that are addressing the needs of queer people, particularly vulnerable communities, in order for you to understand what exactly is going on. And with that data, you can finally use it for evidence-based advocacy on multiple levels, national and international. In order to share this information, there needs to be a really serious investment in queer-led institutions in regions that haven't been there before. If there is no institutions that are either led by the community or have the mandate in order to be able to work successfully with the community to gather this data and to provide protection and needs-based assistance, we will still remain in the dark. There's a real important also efforts to fund and be able to highlight regional and international knowledge sharing fora to be able to not only help organizations in gathering that data, but in providing spaces for them to be able to share it, particularly in the global south.
Okay, thank you. I do see some potential entry points for us here. So thank you for that. And thank you for the work you're all doing. Such fantastic presentations. And I think we could go on. There's more questions, but I'm afraid we can't answer them all. There's just one thing, Jay, if possible, could you share the country strategy for Ghana? And if not now, we can share it online and pass it out perhaps in a different forum. Let me now turn to a colleague who is a country director for Tanzania, Zambia, Malawi, and I know I'm forgetting one country, I should be looking, Zimbabwe. Sorry, Mara. Really welcome. Over to you for some closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Louise. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It really has been a very thought-provoking discussion to hear all of these different perspectives on these important issues around inclusion and the impact, particularly that laws and regulations and practices are having on LGBTI people around the world. As Louise said, my name is Mara Warwick, and I'm the World Bank Country Director for Tanzania, Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. So I have the pleasure, but also the challenge of wrapping up and summarizing this rich discussion that we have all had today. So just a few thoughts from my side to do that. First of all, I think we have heard today through the presentation on the EcoSoji report, but I think even more importantly, from our intervention from Kosovo, from NASLI, about the importance of having a good legal structure to be able to underpin equal opportunity and equal participation for everyone. We know that equal participation requires at its fundamental level people to be treated equally under the law. And we heard about the importance of these different elements of that legal foundation to make sure that there is social and economic inclusion for sexual and gender minorities. During the discussion, of course, we heard about examples from Kosovo, as I said, from Lebanon, and then also more broadly through our development partners from USAID, ADB, and of course the World Bank. So number one, the legal system we know is very important. But I think what we also heard, and this I was very struck by the emphasis again that our colleague from Kosovo made on the importance of implementation. Laws by themselves are simply not enough. It's very important that these laws be implemented and that people be free from discrimination in practice as well as in theory. So as all of the panelists, I think, coming from government, from civil society, and from the development community, by virtue of all of their interventions and all of their discussions, we really see the importance of all groups working together and working together with the community. I really liked that idea that nothing about us without us. I think that is definitely the most important element, to make sure that not only are we all as development practitioners working together, but that the communities be intimately involved in that. I've personally worked in Asia, in Eastern Europe, and now in Africa region. And in each of these regions, I have to say, there are challenges for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex people, and on the basis of their sexual orientation and gender identity. We see laws do vary quite a bit across all of these regions. Some, unfortunately, still criminalize, while others, and we have, of course, the excellent example from Kosovo today, are laws that protect. So we see that there is a great variation across the world, including in the Africa region, where I'm currently working. At the same time, I think what is important in this discussion and in the others that we have is to highlight the progress that is being made. So a couple of examples from the Africa region more broadly. We know, for example, in 2020, parliaments decriminalized same-sex consensual acts between adults in Gabon and Angola. And Mozambique's parliament did the same in 2015. And in Botswana, decriminalization resulted from a high court decision in 2019. So we are seeing over the last few years, step by step, progress being made on the legal framework in particular. Now, in terms of implementation and from the World Bank side, of course, Louise already mentioned it, but an important tool is the bank's environmental and social framework. And this is an entry point for discussion. It's an entry point for engagement and an entry point for us to be able to think how the projects that the bank and other development partners are supporting can really advance SOGI inclusion, going beyond the do no harm into a more proactive and positive stance. And I think it is important where we work together as development partners, as we do very often, for example, in this region of the world, many development partners working together, that we use that framework as a way to all come together in a positive way to ensure SOGI inclusion. And I think that even in countries and in environments where the context is challenging for SOGI, the ESF is a way to focus attention, and it is a way to create a space for discussion and for making sure that projects reach their goals. I do think that the emphasis that we heard in this meeting also on provision of services and ensuring that SOGI inclusion is really an integral part of all development programs, service provision, education, health, food security, we heard about, access to shelter. This is a very important reminder also that every project that we as the development community support needs to really think carefully about SOGI inclusion. And lastly, just to say that while we know that there continue to be significant challenges, and certainly I think we all know that the COVID pandemic has not been helpful in this respect. We have seen across many parts of the world, violence has increased during the pandemic, and a much more focused look at how to really strengthen the prevention of violence is something certainly that we are looking at here in the Africa region of the World Bank. But these are elements, therefore, these are issues which predated the pandemic, of course, but some things that we know have also become more challenging in the pandemic. And so as we go forward, as a global community, as a development community, as the World Bank and all of our partners, this really is an important moment for us to focus again and think about what can we do more. And today, certainly from our three panelists, Nazli, Jay, and Tarek, I certainly learned a lot from all of you and the ideas that you brought forward, particularly about implementation, how can we really make sure that this can work in the projects that we support and the work that we do around the world. So thank you again for everyone for joining. Thank you to our panelists. Thanks a lot to Louise, Cliff, and the team for inviting me also to participate and to have the opportunity to learn from you. And I'm sure that in the work that my teams do going forward, we will very much benefit from what we have learned here today, and will continue to do everything we can to promote SOGI inclusion in the work that we do. So thank you very much for inviting me, and back to you, Louise.
Super. Thank you so much, Mara. And thank you a lot for your commitment to this topic in your work. It's really great to partner with you and the countries you cover on this agenda and to your commitment. I'd like to thank all of these panelists. It was an incredibly rich discussion. I'd like to thank all of you for joining to commemorate Idaho, an important moment, and that events like this are all part of our work that we're doing together to do what you said was your number one priority, to see the decriminalization, but overall, to expand rights and inclusion for LGBTI plus people in the world today. So thank you for your commitment. Thank you for joining us today, and let's keep working on this important agenda and making progress. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you and goodbye.